The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
Reb Chaim's son, Reb Shlomo Belavaya, sent over a story that after his father, Reb Chaim's father, the Stipler, passed away, he started saying a shir on Motzei Shabbos on Yerushalmi. And during that year, after the passing of the Stipler, he said on Yerushalmi all of Zrayim. What we have today on the Yerushalmi and Zrayim is from that shir. That was the only time in his life that Reb Chaim said that a shir, except on the yard side of his father. He did that for a year. When he finished Zrayim, he then did Masechta Shabbos and finished Masechta Shabbos, and then he stopped. I don't recall if his son said that he asked or someone else asked Reb Chaim, why did you stop this much Shabbos shir on Yerushalmi? As I said a little bit ago, we have on Yerushalmi today is from that shir on Zrayim. Why did you stop? And Reb Chaim answered, because I have to prepare for that shir, and I don't have the time to prepare. So he was asked, how long do you have to prepare for that shir? And I'm sure you got up and heard the Levi early in the morning on Sunday. Reb Chaim answered, I have to prepare for 5 minutes. And I can't prepare for 5 minutes. I don't have the 5 minutes. And that's why, whatever Reb Chaim's teshbonos were, the shir stopped. And when I heard that story, and I tried to process it on Sunday, against the backdrop of what we just said for the last 15 or 17 minutes, the base-selling king of the Sefer Torah, the Sarah Torah, the Urim and Tumim, Nashos, Nashchino, I tried to just comprehend that story. Reb Chaim stopped that shir in Yerushalmi because he didn't have the 5 minutes to prepare. How many at this base medrash are able to say, how many times did Reb Chaim do? There's a beautiful picture of Reb Chaim participating in the Sebet and Anochas Even Afina of the base, beautiful base, Knesset's base medrash. Reb Chaim gave you on the road a lot more than 5 minutes. How many countless tens and tens and tens of thousands, no hyperbole, did he stop his life and give 5 minutes and 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 5 minutes to say the shir? He didn't have the time. But for every yid, of every background, of every facet, he had all the time. I tried to make a very accurate cheshbon on Shabbos. I'm trying to be accurate of how many times I was zeicha to be in the Kodesh HaKadoshim on the end of B'chol Rashbal. Approximately between 60, 70, 80, upwards to 100 times. You know how many times I got the 5 minutes? Someone who, a Talmud of Reb Chaim, Shmuel David, HaKohen Friedman, the Mechaber of the State Sefer, made a cheshbon. There are in excess of 350,000 handwritten letters of Reb Chaim. Did the Olam hear the magnitude of what we just said? More than if he knows, because he happens to have well over 3,000 of them. A lot are in his classic Sefer, but I'm sure you know what I'm referring to. He's actually publishing a Sefer now with about 500 letters. He himself has over 3,000. I'm zeicha to have one, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But if you make a calculation, he said clearly, close to 400,000 handwritten letters. And I've heard stories of the last, how many 5 minutes did they take? Even if Reb Chaim responded in a few brief words, 400,000 letters, no one has ever written so many Ksav Yad. 5 minutes for the shir, he didn't have 5 minutes for every member of Klal Yisrael, as much as a person needs. A relative of mine, when they knew I was speaking a few nights ago up in North Miami Beach, reminded me that this relative wasn't well. He was told that he needed a biopsy of his brain. And so he did what many did. He flew to Eretz Yisrael to get a bracha for Reb Chaim. And he told me how Reb Chaim told him, you don't need a brain. He told me the exact conversation with Reb Chaim. You don't need a brain biopsy. He gave him a bracha. He repeated a few lines very strongly. It happens to be this relative of mine went back to America, went to the doctors, and the doctors looked. What was there was non-existent. They don't even know what they were originally looking at. The next scan had nothing at all. They told this relative of mine, you don't need a brain biopsy at all. We could talk about Meisim without an end. But do you know what this relative of mine reminded me of? When Chaim gave him and his family time because of how nervous he was in by Chaim 12 minutes. Chaim stopped saying a shir and Yerushalmi because he didn't have the 5 minutes, but he gave the world endlessly to make each yid feel better. And this relative reminded me, I sat 12 minutes. I remember it was a number of years ago. I was in North Miami Beach. You'll forgive me. Most of us think the hurricane I'm referencing was Irma. A few people think it wasn't. I believe it was. I know North Miami Beach, a few miles in between, but I remember coming to shul on Friday morning and someone saying the intensity of the rain and the storm and the hurricane of Irma, it could very well be Monday morning, North Miami Beach won't exist. This wasn't said by somebody who's a hypochondriac. This was said by somebody who's a big Yekdayat. I don't know if you remember well, it was a number of years ago. They said South Florida, as we know it, is finished. I was asked by a number of people at institutions to call Reb Chaim. Now, Reb Chaim does not have a phone, so somebody calls it, no. What happens via Mol is someone takes their phone and puts it by Reb Chaim so you could hear his voice. It was Erev Shabbos. Maybe you remember, it was only a few years ago. Shame on us if we don't remember. And the one who, Reb Nosson Yafti, one of my dearest friends, went to Reb Chaim with his phone. He said, who was on the phone? He allowed me to speak. I expressed it. Reb Nosson told Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim listened. 5 minutes for this he did have. And his first response to me through the phone, I heard his voice was, because we were fearful that the water, the deluge, it was mamish going to be a mabba like we never saw. Reb Chaim said, and I heard the words from Reb Chaim, V'hamayim lohem chayma. A reference, of course, to what it says by the Oz Yoshua, that the waters stood up like this, and the waters remained standing in place like a sturdy wall. V'hamayim lohem chayma. Reb Chaim, of course, meant V'hamayim lohem chayma, the water will not make it to South Florida. Or at least I remember I spoke about North Miami Beach. I want to be accurate with the story. And then he went on to give many, many grafes. Now, I don't know how well you were. I remember this part very clearly. That was on a Friday. Virtually, I say none, in case somebody could remember that there were a few droughts. Between none and none, no rain came. There was, in North Miami Beach, one tree, a twig tree about yay big, that snapped and fell over. And everybody was photographing it because that was the big aftermath of that hurricane. I am telling you firsthand the mice of Amayim Lem Klima. But I'm not telling you, as I said a moment ago, because of the Moifes Hadar, the miracle word from our generation. I'm telling it to you because that was another one of the 5 minutes that I received. When I myself wasn't well, lo aleinu, approximately 19 years ago, every shayla, every decision, and everything that doctors weren't sure about, we took into Reb Chaim and went with the psak of the generations Urim et Tumim. I remember the questions crystal clear. I remember one particular that a doctor said, I don't know. And when after I wasn't well, lo aleinu, and then Baruch Hashem, Chazdei Hashem, I was better, we sent the shayla into Reb Chaim. We had it handwritten. What now? So the Seidov, Birchas HaGoimel, guide us. And to that, Reb Chaim responded in his Ksav Yad, and I have that letter in my bedroom at home. And when I heard the Besur, I took out that letter and read it once again. That was another 5 minutes. And I'm zeicha to give a nightly Gemara shir, and in the nightly Gemara shir, a number of years ago, we finished one Masechta. We didn't know what the next Masechta should be. And so the Olam had asked me a number of us needed and wanted shidduchim for children. Ask Reb Chaim as a schus for shidduchim for children. I want to keep in mind that the shir has about 15, 16, 17 nightly members. They wanted to know when you go to Reb Chaim next, ask what Masechta should we learn as a schus for the shidduchim for our children. I had a daughter that was in shidduchim and wanted to be zayka to a chasana, and so did multiple other members of the shir. So I went into Reb Chaim, and it's on video, and this is what happened. I said with Nasan Yafi, what Masechta should we learn as a schus for the shidduchim for the members of the shir? And Reb Chaim said, Masechta Kedusha. Then he said, Maineth in one day.
In the future.
So I said, we can't possibly learn it in the most respectful way. It was a one day. Reb Chaim said, you can watch it on the video. It's a klein in Masechta. It's only 81 lot. Then after a few moments, he said, Un meinich mit toises. I didn't know what to do, so Reb Nosson Yafi helped me and said, but can the Rav see that if they start Kedushin, the bracha will be chal? That the bracha will be chal, it won't work if they just start Kedushin, even if they don't finish it in a day. Parenthetically, it took us about 2 years. And the bracha be chal, or Chaim said, yes, it's chal just for starting, and he gave a meritig bracha for shidduchim. That year, 13 of us made chasanas, myself and 12 others. And I was asked the next year to go back and tell Reb Chaim the end of the story. And I mention it to you because that was another 5 minutes.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org